We're on again.
Okay.
So you were talking about Fuji.
What's in the push? I'll do is pushing.
This guy. Oops.
Oh, we don't know what that is. Some bird place.
Let me just go quickly.
Boy, you can see it a lot better.
Yeah, this morning.
What's that guy's name? I knew all these guys.
All right.
That's
I'm gonna stop real quick. I think I got something wrong here. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think we said something about it yesterday, but that's just a picture of people climbing up the mountain, and then we discussed that yesterday. That there's a saying that everybody climbs up Fuji from Japan, but I'll go to the next one.
Wait. Okay. All right, go.
This is a rare picture because we didn't always wear. We usually wore civilian clothes. Those days, sailors didn't wear civilian clothes, but we was a special group, so we got to wear civilian clothes, and so we didn't very often wear those are dress blues there. Those are friends of mine. I can't remember their name. I think we're in Yokohama, but we could have been a number of places. What we did is we had so much time off that we'd go on a little trip quite often. And most every day we'd take the 7-mile shuttle to Yokohama, and we'd go to the Octagon Theater and see a movie. And then we'd go and buy drinks. And when we got enough drinks, we'd get back on the shuttle and go back. We went to Yokohama Zoo. We'd go all over. We'd go to Kamakura. We'd go all places relatively close to Tokyo.
So besides drinking and going to movies, what would you do?
Well, played basketball in the court. Of course, we worked quite a bit, and that's pretty much what we did. That's pretty much it. Played cards. We played a lot of cards. If we stayed in the base, we'd play poker, 10-cent poker.
So this is 7 years or 8 years after the war, 1 year after occupation ended, right?
This was in. I got there November 30th on my birthday, 1952. And I was stationed, planning on going to Yokosuka, and that's where the facility was, the communication facility. But when I got there, they had already moved it to this brand new base called Kamiseya, and so we went there. We went from Yokosuka to Kamiseya in a truck, the ones that had boards around it, and Japan really had a different smell. I mean, it had a lot of fertilizer smell. It had all exotic smell. So not only were the sights exotic, but the smells were exotic. Now, when I went over there last year, all those smells are gone.
So is it sewage smells?
Well, they used night soil or human fertilizer on their rice paddies, and then they had people collect their sewage. People came around in honey buckets and cleaned out the toilet at Gofijo, and so it's pretty crude. Now they got some of the most modern toilets in the world. When we were in Japan, they had you sit down on it, it plays music, and after you're through, it uses water, and it's pretty modern, much more than ours.
So was there just quickly, when you walked around town with your military uniform on, was there any hostility or anything?
No, but there were places where we weren't supposed to go, so we stayed pretty much on the main drags. But they didn't want you to go in the cramped up quarters or someplace. There was hostility around, and they had people. I didn't know what they were doing, but they would have bands around their head with a red red spot on it, and they'd be ranting and raving, and I don't know what they were doing, but we always got away from there. So there was some hostility. We never experienced personally.
All right, the next one.
This is a two-man submarine that was on, I think it was in Yokosuka. This is what they use for submarines. It's the ones that attacked Hawaii were two-man submarines. So this is what that is, and they'd taken it a little bit apart so people could see what it's made of. They have one in Japan, in Hawaii too. I saw one there in Pearl Harbor.
They're actually surprisingly large, but small.
Well, it's pretty small. You think two people have to live in it. Probably today they'd probably use something smaller, but at those days
They'd use an unmanned.
Yeah, they used an unmanned. But this small. I mean, if you put that beside a submarine, it'd be very small. Oh, there we are. We're on. That was the people I climbed Mount Fuji with. Now, most of those people aren't people that I usually ran around with. In fact, I only recognize one. And these are the stores. Remember I told you about the stores? These are what the stores look like. They were pretty crude. And they called them stations. And every time you went to one, you see the Fuji flag on top with and then a Japanese flag. You went up there and you could buy candy and you could buy pop and there. And then there's some of them you could stay all night, rest. Now we'd already been to Fuji because no, I guess we haven't because you get a little banner. You did in those days anyway. When you got to the top of Mount Fuji, that was quite a job climbing Mount Fuji.
So actually, yesterday you said you went down with a stick between your legs.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, on the side of Mount Fuji, it was ash. So if you got on that ash and you put a stick between your leg to use as a brake, you could go down there. It's pretty stupid. You could have lost control and went hell over heels. But we were 20 years old. We went down a long ways that way. And so our trip down was rather rapid. We could go down there until we got to the tree line. And then we had to go on the path. But it was all downhill, obviously. Yeah. Boy, I haven't seen that picture. I didn't even know I had that picture. That's pretty good. Isn't that funny? Now that's the Yokohama Club. I told you about the Yokohama Club where that girl came out. Do you want me to say what that girl said? We came on the first night we was in Yokohama. I don't know who I went out with. There was 3 or 4 of us, and we were going to have a big adventure in Yokohama. So we didn't know what to do, so we heard about the Yokohama Club. So we went over to the Yokohama Club, and there was this whack, and she must have been 5 foot tall, 5 foot tall, and about 2 feet wide. So we asked her, what's there to do in Yokohama? And now you got to realize this is 1952. And she says, do you want to fight, fuck, or go to the movies? And we were flabbergasted, absolutely flabbergasted. Never even knew a woman could say that. And here she was saying that. Well, we chose a movie, and we went to the Octagon, went to the theater, and probably went to some bar afterwards, took the shuttle back. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's the Yokohama. Now, that was one of the biggest modern places in Yokohama. That place, I'm sure, is cut down now. The movies. They always had these movies. They had these movies and they showed the pictures of them. They were always kind of colorful. And so I took a picture of one. That one's Alan Ladd, and I don't know who the woman is. It was Technicolor.
So would they get new movies every week?
I don't know how long they had them. And they did in the Octagon, they had every week, and they had regular movies. We saw movies you couldn't believe. They just had them in those days. They didn't make as many movies, so we saw the most awful B movies that you could. They showed movies on the base too, but it was really Mickey Mouse old films and all. We never went to those. But one thing we did do, they had dime night on Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday. That means you could buy all your drinks for 10 cents. Mixed drinks, beer, everything. So usually they had it once a week, and we usually took our share of it. I think if you stayed in the service and you drink all the time like that, you'd probably end up to be an alcoholic. Gee, we sure did do a lot of drinking.
I didn't know you actually drank that much. You always said you didn't, or maybe.
Well, I didn't drink that much, but I mean, it didn't take much. I mean, we'd all go out. One time we went into Yokohama, and we had 56 hours off, and so we went right from work, and we hit several service clubs that had 10 nights, and on the third day, I got up and I didn't get up, I turned around, we had breakfast, and I said, you know what? We've been awake ever since we got up. I said, I think I'll go back to the barracks and go to sleep. But you know, you're young, you do silly things like that. This is just a big typical Japanese picture. This guy is selling some type of bread, rice bread. You can see the old car there. And I just took a picture to preserve it so I could, 57 years, I could tell you about it.
So wait, it looks like the guy's wearing a service hat or something. Is that just?
No, he's wearing a bandana like around it from the back of his head up. And they used to wear those all the time. So you'd ask them to take pictures, and they like to take pictures. Japanese they really like to take photos, and they like you to take pictures of them. So it was no problem. Where some places people don't like you to take a picture. In 1953, they loved it. And that's Yokohama railroad station. And they had a good railroad system, and we could get there and go straight to Yokohama. Tokyo wasn't too far away. It's on the same harbor. Tokyo Bay, Yokohama's there. And now they consider Yokohama as just a suburb of Tokyo. Then there was some land that wasn't developed. But, and I could read Japanese. I learned the katakana, which is the phonetic one. And so I was able to read things. You could see what kind of things they were selling. If it didn't translate to English, I didn't know what it said. But that worked out pretty good.
So would those be pretty new?
Pardon me?
Railroad stations? You would assume they would have been bombed out.
Well, they probably were. The railroad stations were probably bombed out. This was 8 years after the war ended, so they had some. I imagine that would have been one of the first things they straightened out. But it was really interesting. You go to the railroad stations, and I hear it's the same now, and the door would open, and they would push you in there, and they'd just pack you in there. They'd have pushers that just pack you into the train station, and you'd be inside just packed. And I wanted to show your mother that, but we got on the subway in Tokyo, and there wasn't anything like that when we got this year when we went to Tokyo. And your mother just loved Japan. It's a pretty country, and the people are nice. And I didn't think I'd ever get back. I'm glad I went. And this is another movie. This is a Japanese movie. This is a Japanese theater. The only time we went there was when Martine Carrel played. Martine Carrel was a French actress, which one time in the movie, she'd come out of a flower or a shell or some dance number, and she'd be totally nude. And boy, we'd sit through a movie that was in French and translated in Japanese, and we'd sit there the whole time waiting for that one scene where Martine Carrel would pop out of something. That's Tom Hoekson. We're pretty good friends. I think it's Jasper, Indiana, is where he's from. And He was a nice guy.
How do you spell his name? Hoke?
Hoegson, Hoeguson, I don't know how you spell it. And he and CD were the ones that we always went with. You know, see, it was kind of good. CD was married and I was married, so we didn't whore around. And Tom Hoegson didn't either. So we don't know why he didn't, but he didn't. So that's why we pretty well hung around together. And then other people came in and out. We had a fellow, I can't remember his name, he was African American, and he was from New York, really intelligent guy. And so he didn't go with us very often unless we knew we were going to some travel place or something. He didn't go just to go on liberty. He usually read, stayed down the base unless if we said we were going to the zoo or if we were going to Kamakura or we went to Enoshima or other places. He would go, or we'd go to a hotel. We could stay at a Japanese hotel for practically nothing. We had to sleep on tatamis, but they were clean and they were nice. So the only thing that limited us was we didn't have any money. Good old Tom. Oh, this is the one department store in Yokohama. This is probably the most modern place. We used to go in there and look around. They had watches, and it was like a department store. And you see, it's pretty nice. Most places aren't that nice. But all of them are now over there. We went down to the Ginza. And when I went to Ginza, 1953, it was all neon lights, and it was a place where you found prostitutes and entertainment. And now it's just like Wilshire Boulevard. It's our rodeo. It's really upscale. Everything's nice. I mean, Japan is so modern and so nice now. But you lost a lot of flavor. We used to have flavor in '53.
So were the watches there? I mean, was that legitimate department store, or was it?
This was legitimate. It was a department store. It was legitimate. Well, if you bought black market was illegal, and but if you bought a watch in the we called it ship service, the Army calls it PX, and if you bought a watch here, you could go out and sell it for twice. And in order to discourage black market, something wrong?
No, keep going.
Well, to discourage it,
It's a little loud.
we didn't get any money. We didn't get money.
All right, just a second. It's a little loud. All right. All right, try it. In order to discourage.
We didn't get any money. We got script. We got military script. And every once in a while, they'd call it all in. And so if you were in the black market business and you were making lots of money, they would change the script. And so that money, you either had to turn it in, or there's no place to turn it in, or you lost it. And they did that. They did that several times when we were over there. And if you had greenbacks, they were worth a lot. If you had a regular old dollar, you could go in the black market. Had this first class that we went on Liberty. We went down to Yokosuka one time, and he had a watch. And the Japanese guy said, how much you want for the watch? And he said, I don't know what it was, some ridiculous figure. And the Japanese said, okay. So the Japanese starts putting the money out, and of course this first class setter was pretty happy. He was making a big chunk of change. Well, after he left, he took the money out to count it. There was money, there was a $5 bill in front, a dollar bill in the back, and the middle was nothing but paper. So, the old scam, you get too greedy, you don't follow common sense. This is a map of Japan. we were in Honshu, known as Kyushu. And some island, earthquakes all the time. We had earthquakes, we had typhoons, twice we had typhoons. We were in typhoons. It rains all the time. I had a calendar, and so for a whole year I kept how often it rained. And it rained every single day. Now some days it was just a sprinkle. Some days it was really heavy. But you know, it's a small island and you see rivers all over. And of course it's got to rain or we wouldn't have all these rivers. But the weather was mild. It snowed in the winter. Hot and humid in the summer. We didn't have air conditioning in the barracks. It just got miserable. And we'd complain about it. And they said, well, you could be on a ship. It'd be a lot worse on a ship. So, well, I couldn't complain much anyway. I don't know what this is. This is probably Yokohama. Yeah, it is a Yokohama. That's Yokohama. And you see sailors came in from Korea. They had R&R, rest and recuperation, I believe is what it stood for. And they'd come in and they would spend money like it was going out of style. So whenever the R&R Army people came in, we tried to stay out of town because the only thing you did was, I think every farm girl came in as a prostitute when that was there, and the only thing you could do was go to the movie and go home because it was everything was packed. Yeah, it's kind of sad. These people had been over there fighting, and it didn't make any difference to them what they did. They were going to have a good time. But you can see which way the streets run. The cars go on the same side that the English do, and you can see the cars were mostly a lot of American cars, although they did have Japanese cars in. And in the cars, when you take a cab, they had flowers with fresh flowers on the side. I don't know if they'd have that. I don't believe so. But it was pretty nice.
So did the Army guys fight with the Navy guys?
No. The only time we had people. We had two big guys. They were about 6'2", 300 pounds, and they went out. They went out every week to get in a fight. And the only big fight I heard is they went down to the enlisted men's club in Yokosuka, and a British ship was in town, and they all got rowdy and drunk, and the British people toasted and said, "Long live the Queen," and some wise guy said, "Fuck the Queen," and they had kind of a battle royal. That's the only one I know that day. But one of these guys, one of these fellows named Boog, he came into the barracks one night and just yelling and screaming and waking everybody up. And so I yelled at him, kind of like a down in front moment. And I said, "For God's sakes, why don't you grow up and not wake everybody up?" I was on the bottom bunk. He came over and reached down, picked me up with one hand. One hand, took me about 20 feet and put me against the wall and said, "What did you say?" I think they call that a teaching moment.
So what'd you do?
I don't know what I did. I didn't say any more, I'll tell you that. He let go of me. He could come anytime he wanted to and say whatever he wanted to do, and I wouldn't go say anything to him. But they fought all the time. That's what they did. And he went to Skaggs Island. He got stationed up Skaggs Island, and he was drunk, and he jumped out of a moving car and killed himself. You know where Skaggs Island is? Mm-hmm. It's on the way to Sonoma. On the right-hand side, they'll say Skaggs Island.
Why do they keep guys like that in the military?
Oh, he wouldn't hurt anybody. Oh, these are some pictures of some Japanese girls I took. Gee, that's a stereo. They had all these beautiful Japanese girls, and the men were always talking about, oh, gee, I wish I could date an American girl. And I thought, gee, why would you want to do that? Oh, this is the base. This is where this is Commissary. You can see there's very few cars. And we're looking directly at the mess hall. And the mess hall would go through the line, and then we'd be waited on. They'd give us milk, and they'd give us seconds. So we had pretty nice deal for enlisted men. Food was absolutely excellent. That's one thing I found out when I went in the service. My mother wasn't a very good cook. I'd never eaten a salad in my life. And we had good food, excellent food. And in the background on this picture, you can see the big communications tower, and then in the back is an administration building. And I worked in an administration building once. I got in a little trouble, and so they shanghaied me up there, and they were copying facsimile facts of weather, of Russian weather. They intercepted Russian weather, and we had things these roads were about 6 foot wide and about 20 yards long. And you would set the controls, you'd tune it in, and then it would go back and forth with a stylus that burnt. And pretty soon you'd have a map, and it'd show all the weather fronts and so on and so forth. And I did that. I had to go down at night. I had to get up in the middle of the night. And they were punishing me, so they didn't treat me very well. But eventually they had to call me back because I was a good radio operator. I could copy code well. And they brought me back and down in we lived in there was this tunnel we lived that we worked in that high security. We copied Russian code. I copied Vladivostok, and we'd stay on one frequency and listen to one station they're sending. Vladivostok had a lot of, it's a large naval company station, so they had a lot of messages, so he was pretty busy all the time.
What were some of the messages? Were they pretty routine?
Well, we had nothing on code. When you send coded messages, you send them 5 characters, and then you send their 5 characters and 5 groups, and then 5 down, and you just come. So when you're copying, you just come in square rectangles, and so you keep copying them. So you don't know what they say, but they'd start out. You'd hear them. They weren't on, so you sit there listening for it, and they'd sing V's, like you hear da 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 da. They got da 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 da, and then you'd know and you'd tune them in, and then they would ask dow dow di dow di dow di di dow di di dow dow di di, which means how are you, and then they'd say to the other guy dow dow di dow di 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 dow. That means send V's, and then the guy would go, they were tuning their transmitter, and so they'd say di-di-di-dow, 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 di-di-di-dow. Then they'd start sending messages, and you'd be there a long time just copying code. And it isn't like you'd go, most people would think like if somebody sent an S, that should say S. It all goes in your head. We had typewriters that had Cyrillic characters on it. It was all Russian typewriter. And when you hear the code, you just push the fingers. You just push the fingers automatically. You can sit there and you're always copying. You're always copying behind. So you got to concentrate, and you sit there, and then every once in a while you might get static, or you might get interference from from storms, or you might have sunspots, or you might have another radio station coming in. So you have to concentrate on what you're doing. And then when they're through, somebody'd come by and pick it up from you, and then they'd take it in the back, and if they could, they'd decode it. And so that's what we did.
So were the decoders have higher status than you guys?
Well, most of the things we copied were secret. Sometimes we got. One time I was put on a special circuit where I didn't have a station to copy. I didn't have a frequency to monitor. I could look all over, and that was really a lot of fun. You know, usually you'd pick it up and you'd get the call letters, and you'd ask, you'd look up who they were, and if somebody was already doing it. But one time I got this one that was really strange, and it was Khrushchev's airplane. So I told the chief, I said, I have something here that's unusual. And so they saw what I was doing, and they said, oh, that's Khrushchev's airplane. That's what they finally determined. I don't know how long it took them to do it. So as I copied it, I copied the messages, and as I copied it, it stamped top secret on it. It wasn't very long. I don't think, airplanes don't send messages continuously, although I imagine the one with Khrushchev on it would send more messages than most. So he was probably going to Vladivostok or someplace. So that was.
So the Morse code, you said they'd open up with these how are yous. Mm-hmm. So is that in English or is that just
No, they're called Q symbols. In other words, they have all things. You go QSV means send V's. QRN means you have static. QRM means you have interference. I think I still remember those right. It's one way or the other. So they use international Q signals. All that's passé. Now they send everything off of a satellite.
All right. Oh, why'd you get in trouble?
Well, I was sitting on a circuit, and I was copying it, and so I'd been working about 2 hours straight. It's pretty hard work. So I turned the volume, or we call it the gain, up after they signed off, and I put it around the earphones around my neck. So if anything happened, I could pick it up and do it. And I was resting. Since I didn't smoke, it looked like I was doing nothing, which is exactly what I was doing. But I had this theory: if you're smoking, you look like you're busy. And this chief came by. His name was Atwood. He says, Scott, he says, put those earphones on. I said, well, I've been working 2 hours straight, Chief. I said, I need a rest. He said, I told you to put those headphones on. And the problem, this chief wasn't the most competent chief. And I said to him, I turned around and said, okay, Deadwood. He didn't like that at all. And so they called the Marines up. And the Marines couldn't come in, so they waited for me. And they took me out to where the guard was. How you got in the tunnel, and he took me. I said, "Oh boy, this is great." I'd only been on a watch. It was a midnight watch, midnight to 8. So I thought, well, this is pretty good. This is a pretty good deal. I get to go and rest. Well, I got on the bunk, and at that time I was on the top bunk. And every hour, this Marine would come by and ask me my serial number, which is 460-75-26, or something you always remember. So then I got a captain's mast. That's a lowest level legal thing you can get into. And so they called me up, this captain, and he was a captain of the base. I don't know what he knew about what we were doing or anything. So anyway, he asked me a bunch of questions, And I told him, and he said, well, that's insubordination. And then he told me what he was going to do to me. And he was going to give me a 2-0. 4-0 was perfect. 2-0, you know. You have to almost go to bed with a captain's wife to get a 2-0. And he put me on restriction. He gave me a fine. And he did all these things. So I went back to the barracks. And I got my Blue Jacket manual and I read it. And there are certain things you can do on a captain's mast. And they're not the things he said. So I went to chief and said, I want to speak to the officer, department officer. He says, what for? He says, I want to appeal. What do you mean you want to appeal? I said, the captain did something that was against regulations. So he put me into the lieutenant. I told the lieutenant I wanted to appeal it. He said, well, you realize if you appeal this, since you did it for a captain, it's got to be an admiral, isn't it? Do you want to have an admiral go through this? I said, yes, I want to have the admiral do it. Well, they were in a tizzy now. Now the shoe had been put on the other foot. So they had another captain's mast for me. And it was much lighter, but still wasn't fair. So I come back and they say, you're not man enough to take punishment. The chiefs were doing that. Now they're on my back all the time. And you're not man enough to take your punishment. So I was sitting down there, and they put me on a Chinese circuit. Now Chinese send awfully fast, and they're awfully good. You had to be a pretty good code copier to put on a Chinese circuit. So I said there, I didn't especially like it. I mean, you would get back to the base, and it was so intense that you had Morse code going through your head while you were sleeping. It was really hard. So this chief comes up to me, Steiger, Chief Steiger, no, I can't remember his name. I thought I'd never forget it, but I did. And he came back and he says, Scott, I want to let you know, I'm never going to recommend you for 3rd class. He said, as long as you're going to be here, you're going to be seaman. So I looked at him and I said, seaman is not a rate. Seaman is somebody who's trying to get a rate, and they're strikers. I says, I'm relieved by a 1st class, and I relieve a 2nd class, and I'm a seaman. And I said, if I'm not going to get recommended for 3rd class, then give me a seaman circuit. So that's when they took me off and put this where I searched, which was really fun. I like to do that. And usually put the better people on it. So that was fun.
They put you on what?
Well, where you sit, remember I told you when you had cruise ship, where I just look around the dial, I'm just searching all over, trying to see if there's a circuit that we're not copying. And then if I found one we didn't copy, I'd copy it.
So that was punishment?
No, it wasn't punishment. It wasn't punishment at all. Punishment was not ever going to recommend me for 3rd class. That was a punishment. And he knew he was in the wrong. You can't say, you guy's not qualified to be 3rd class when you had him relieved by a 1st class and he relieves a 2nd class. So I sat there, the rest of my time I sat there, and then one day this chief comes up, big smile on his face, and he said, Scott, you like discipline a lot, don't you? I didn't say anything. He said, we are going to transfer you to the Yorktown. I said, and at that time I'd put in to get out early because the Korean War was over and they were letting you do that. And so I put in to get out early so I could go to college. So I had about 5 months left till I left the place. And he says, you'll like it there. He says, you'll be working for the Admiral, and you stand duty and dress blues. He says, I'm sure you're really going to like the discipline you get over on the Yorktown. I think it's Yorktown, might have been another one. So I said, the only thing about that, Chief, is you can't transfer anybody who has less than 6 months left in the Navy. Oh, did he get mad? He was going to Shanghai and get rid of me for sure. So that was a story. And when I left that base, I had orders that I couldn't get off the plane. I couldn't get bumped. Oftentimes you get on a MATS plane, military plane, and you'd get bumped in Hawaii or something. Like when I went to Hawaii, Honolulu, there were people that had been gone a month before me that were still in Honolulu because they got bumped and they couldn't get back on. So I had priority orders, and so I went all the way to San Francisco.
Why did they give you priority orders?
I don't know. I always figured they wanted to make damn sure I got out of there, because I went from there down to Tokyo, and then from Tokyo I went to Midway, and Midway to Honolulu, and then I ended up at Travis Air Force Base. We stopped at Midway and had lunch.
So did you ever make whatever that rank was?
No. I was seaman. I was seaman when I left. What? Next one?
Next one.
That's just a picture of Yokohama Harbor. It's just a local picture I took. Your mother got excited about whether I took pictures, because I often would take pictures with no people in them, and she likes to have people in them. Oh, this is a group. I see Tom. What the heck was that guy's name? He went with us every time. Anyway, we went to a Japanese resort. You see around the tatami. We do that quite often. Not often. Maybe 15 times we just go down there. It costs nothing, absolutely nothing. And also you could stay in the military bases. There would be Lake Yamanaka. There'd be a lot of places. They had military bases along lakes and places, and we went with those. Those you had to reserve ahead of time. But these were dirt cheap. I mean, I don't know what that is. That's probably a military hotel, but I have no idea what it is. Yeah, there's Yokohama. That's Izaki-cho. That's the main drag of Yokohama. You see, my building's over 2 stories. Now they're 40, 50 stories high. That's brings back old memories. And in these, you can see, sometimes you can see there's a woman there. It's got a kimono. A lot of the women they were really informal kimono that would have crossed over there, and it'd be a thin material, and it wasn't anything like the fancy kimonos that you used to see. But when we was over in Japan this year, we saw none of those kimonos. Now here, as you can see where I lived in this picture. On the right-hand side is the mess hall, and right across the way is the barracks that I slept in. And down on the end of it is the ship service, the Gidunk restaurant, and the gymnasium. And the other one is we had 4 barracks, 360 people in each barracks, 80 on each side. We had 4 quadrants. And CD, he was a seaman when we took that. He made 3rd class, and I think he made chief. He stayed in for 20. We were really close. Oh, that's Hicks. Hicks was a Texan, and he liked Western music. Hickson. It wasn't Hicks, it was Hickson. And that's right in front of our barracks. And that other guy that's always in there. That's just on, and you see the barracks I slept in right in front of us on the right-hand side. This guy is really sharp, was Hickson. He had a Texas drawl. What's this? Oh, I can't remember. There's this guy, I would never know his name. That other one, I should know it. This looks like we're at a baseball game, probably at Atsugi. And a lot of people had their wives over, and so that was, the officers. Yeah, that's where it is, Atsugi. They're playing a softball game. Now this one, see, this is when your mother can tell you what happened. This is in our house. That's our old television set. It's Christmas time. The bad guy hit a Garth. Maybe I'll get your mother. Colleen?
I think she's probably gone by now.
I don't think so. Go get her, she's not gone.
Who's that?
That's Shirley Mead. That's Colleen's aunt, her uncle's wife. This looks like Sandy Burns. This looks like that's one of her daughters, Laura, I think. That's your mother there. And the same party. That's your grandmother at a Christmas party. There's Karen. See Karen in the corner? That's Keith. That's Garth. That's Dave Burns. That's Paul there. You probably haven't seen Paul very often. That's Paul there. And we're in our house. That's our old TV there. See Karen, that little girl? There's Karen. And that's Sandy. And these are Carol and Keith's kids. I don't know which one's which. Christmas time. There's Paul, Keith. Oh, that's Carol. That's Carol and that's Carrie there. And your mother was pretty close to Paul. That was your grandmother's brother. And he was in the Air Force, and he was an electrician. He lives up in Washington now.
Washington or Alaska?
Well, he goes up to Alaska in the summertime, but he lives in Washington most of the time. And there's a picture of Ma, Paul, and that's Dorothy, or Dort, we called her. And this was probably Carrie there. So, it's all at the same Christmas party. You know who that is?
It's Karen.
Yep. There's Tom at Little League.
Do you remember the time you stood up and yelled? That's using your head?
Yeah. When it hit you on the head. That's funny. Another things, I didn't go to the games, but I went to every weekend to them. And this is Lynn. And I don't know. All these people, that's Karen. And that's probably Shirley, that's your grandpa. It's our house.
Is that Lynn or is that Jean? That's not Jean, is it?
No, that's not Jean. That's probably Lynn. That's Lynn and that's Sandy. There's your grandmother and your grandfather, and that's Shirley. I got along. I had wonderful in-laws. I got along with them all.
How old do you think Grandma and Grandpa are here?
probably in their 50s, I would guess. Everybody looks so young. Your grandmother was a beautiful woman. Look at Keith. He's a good-looking guy. There's Carol, Keith. That's your grandmother. That's Lynn. That's Sandy. That's Karen. Oh, that's Colleen's aunt, Karen.
Who's dressed in a? Where'd you get that crazy Santa?
I don't know who that is. I don't know her aunt's name.
Isn't that Mom?
Is that your mom?
Yeah, it's Mom.
I don't know. Well, you see everybody there. Your mother, your grandmother, your uncle, your aunt, Ma, Shirley. I don't know.
That's on I Street?
Yeah, that's on I Street. They got a little sparrow.
It's pretty.
And that's Sandy and Mom, Santa Claus. Probably Dave, he'd usually do some weird thing like that. And there's your grandma and grandpa. There's Colleen and I don't know. That'd have to be Suzanne. Where were we living when Suzanne was born? I guess we was living there. And that's your grandmother and that's Mom.
So I think this is New York.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay.
So,
Yeah, I was there. When I went to work for Merrill Lynch, I had to go to New York City for training for 3 months.
wasn't that weird leaving the family for 3 months?
Yeah, I left the family for 3 months. Left city council for 3 months. And we lived right above Grand Central Station on near Park Avenue. And we lived 2 people to a hotel room. We had hot plates. Yeah, it was kind of a fun time. I went to plays there. Went to a little night music and went to other plays. We'd go down to Times Square and get that place where you get the cheap tickets. We'd go there and then we'd go to see the plays. Walked all around. It's a wonderful town to walk around.
So actually I have a memory of that, getting 3 months off of the council kind of being a big deal.
Well, nobody ever done that. It wasn't a big deal, but some people raised fuss about it. Especially people that would just soon see me off. But eventually, well, what I would have done is, I think you could miss 4 readings, that was the way the ordinance. So all I would have done is I would have flown back, gone to a meeting and flew back again. So they realized that they weren't going to get rid of me. That's in the back of this slide is in the back of your grandfather and grandmother's house. And it shows Karen, Suzanne, your mother, and your grandparents. That's that house on Hilltop, really nice house. The people that bought that house took out all of those flowers. Oh, these are friends. These are people that Colleen worked at the bank with. Art's passed away now. That's Art and Lewis and Bob and, oh gosh, I forget her name. That's in our house. See that lamp? That lamp that comes over. We had this couch forever. Colleen? They live up in Escondido. Colleen?
Yes.
What's Bob's wife's name? Yeah, I see his picture, really.
Joy?
Joy, yeah. And they live in Escondido now.
I want to get Prince of them.
Art died about 4 or 5 years ago, and last we saw her about a year ago when we was in Chula Vista. They were good friends. Oh, that's my dad's house when he built the house in back.
What? I'm gonna let Mrs. Lee out.
So he built a house.
Well, he bought this lot, and he had a big piece of property, and so he built a house. He had a lot of trouble with the neighbors. They didn't want him to build a house, but he did. The houses were really small, this front house.
Where was this?
This is National City on 28th Street.
So he didn't build it, he just had it built.
Oh, no, he didn't build it. They had it on Hart and Sons. Oops, something happened here.
Didn't Hart and Sons do your stuff too? No.
I went two there.
That's when Eisenhower.
Wait a minute. I gotta go back one more. That's it. That's Susan and Karen dressing up, riding piggyback on their bed.
And you're dressed in a dairy outfit?
Yeah, I had my dairy uniform on. Next one is, that isn't a Eisenhower. They got snow in the mountains. I don't know what that is.
There's no snow in the mountains.
Right here.
No, those are eucalyptus trees.
Oh, yeah, I see it now. It looked like a mountain. Yeah, that's what it was then. Isn't that funny? It's an optical illusion. I can still see snow on the mountains. I can see eucalyptus trees too.
So you're like 5 more minutes. So,
Okay.
well, not that we have to finish it. Just
That's Halloween. That's Karen and Suzanne trick-or-treating there, Grandpa Nap. It always looks like when Eisenhower had met. It's at the country club. And your mother told that story last night. That's it.
that's it. Wow.
I still don't know else.
All right, I'm gonna ask you a few more questions. So, why did you move to Prescott?
Well, I don't know. We retired. We'd been in Chula Vista for a while. And your mother got very, she wasn't happy with me still keeping my fingers in politics. And we thought, we've lived here all our life. Why don't we go someplace else? And I said, why don't we move someplace else? And your mother immediately said, okay, which surprised me. So we started looking. We went to Oregon, we went up Santa Rosa, we had a lot of places. We went down to Tucson, we went to Payson. We came here not to look for a deliverer, but we came here to visit Howard and Joy. When I retired, the first thing I did is I called Howard and Joy, because we've been friends with them for years. I said, let's go out to dinner. I said, well, we can't. We're leaving for Prescott, Arizona. You are, yeah. So anyway, we came by to see them. And we came by the courthouse, and we just loved it. We loved the trees, we loved the courthouse. So 3 months later, we bought a house and moved over. Great decision. We always said, when we were talking, there's a hummingbird. When we was always talking, we'd say, what we do is rent 1 year to see if we like it. And then if we like it, we'll buy a house. Well, we didn't do that. We just bought a house. So that's why we got to Prescott.
So how did you meet Howard and Joy?
Colleen,
What?
how did we meet Howard and Joy? Oh, she's, Joy was,
Her sister was a neighbor of Mom's.
yeah, her sister was a neighbor of Miles, and her mother, Joy, used to stay over her aunt's house. She used to stay over the house, and your mother met her where they're just kids. And then we met them again when they were about 20, and then when the kids were growing up, we used to play cards together, and then from time to time we'd be together. So I've known each other all night.
Did you get in fights? Card fights?
No. We didn't get in card fights. What happened, we'd be playing. If Howard lost, he'd throw the cards across the room. If I lost, I'd throw the cards across the room. But we never got in fights.
Well, you got mad.
Yeah, we didn't get fights. Only one that used to lose worse than I do is Howard. He would throw the cards across. Oh, you cheated me the whole bit. We used to play spades, and then somebody'd give the ace to somebody. Get all excited about it.
All right, that's it. We'll do it again next time.
Huh?